Hey everyone, Cody here. Well, spring is just around the corner and I would like to just show you some of the seedlings I am starting indoors for the upcoming growing season. So, this is what I got. It's a rather large setup and I've had it pretty much started this setup kind of around mid-November. So some of these seedlings have been here for a while, and particularly these ones. And they've just been small, growing in these containers ever since. But I've been adding more seedlings to it, so here I got a whole bunch of celery, which is doing pretty good so far. And down there is some lovage, which is pretty similar to celery. Here I have a bunch of romaine lettuce. And so I've been kind of picking that as I go along just to kind of snack on. Here I got some golden berries. Now last year's golden berries didn't really mature in time. They were unripe at the very end of the season, but this year I'm just starting them earlier, and I'm going to have them grow individually in these pea pellets until they can be transplanted into larger pots. And I'll make sure I keep them in really large pots once they get bigger. So hopefully if I start them early, the combination of starting them earlier and putting them into larger pots, hopefully I'll get some fresh golden berries by the end of the growing season. And over here, this isn't golden berries, but this is ashwagandha, which is a pretty well-known adaptogenic herb. It's actually the roots you use, ashwagandha. It's actually a nightshade, just like golden berries or tomatoes for that matter. But it's the roots you use. Makes a very good tea. And over here also makes a good tea, although it's not really well known as a tea. This is chia. Chia. Yes, that's right. So this is the exact same plant that's grown in like those classic chia pets you get in those infomercials from way back in the early 2000s. But this can actually be grown as a full-size plant, which I'm doing. And this chia is actually in the salvia family of plants, so it's related to like cooking sage and ceremonial smudge sage. Once it gets to full size, it can be harvested as a tea, and it's a very good tasting tea. I've grown it before in one of my garden beds. Kind of has a bit of a lemony flavor to it, I found. Here's some hollyhocks I've had growing here for a while. And so once spring does come around and it gets warm out, I can just plant these in my garden and they should continue growing from there. Hollyhock's a very beautiful flower. I believe these are like a dark purple or black hollyhock. So that should be pretty. Here I got some marjoram. Just a couple little plants. I'll probably end up planting more seeds, but it's what I got growing for now. Here, some wild lettuce. So I saved these from a wild lettuce plant just kind of growing on the edge of the property. Saved the seeds from that plant and planted these seeds in. Wild lettuce seeds. This would be Lactusa canadensis. And so that's another species of wild lettuce that's on the lettuce family there. Here I got a couple little basils. Definitely has an undeniable basil smell. And here are some holy basil. So this is the tulsi, which is used to make tea. And here are some forget-me-nots, so don't forget about them. They're a nice little pretty flower. So that's great. And then here is actually a Coleus cutting that I took. Well, I actually kind of walked by a bigger plant and then brushed up against it, and this stem broke off. And so I'm just rooting it as another cutting, and then hopefully it roots and I'll have a full new plant from that. Well, more flowers. These are cosmos. They don't technically need to be started early, but I just like growing things for the sake of it, even if they don't make it until it's safe to plant them outside. It's still nice just to have plants growing indoors. No matter how small they might be, this is a single chicory plant, blue chicory. But I have a whole bunch more seeds and I'll definitely be planting more, but this is just what I got in here so far. Here I got some strawberry spinach. It's also known as strawberry blight. And this is the first time I've actually been successful with growing it. I guess the secret is to start it indoors. And it makes spinach-like plants that have little berry-like clusters that kind of look like a strawberry. Really good eating. I really like them. Here are a couple of my kale plants that I saved from hybrid kales that were just growing outside in my garden last year. I believe these would be crossed with some of the other brassicas that were in the area, possibly my Brussels sprout or some of my cabbage that were all flowering at the same time. So we'll see how these turn out. They look like, starting to look pretty much like kales so far. They got the classic kale-like leaves, but excited about that. So here's some wild daga. It's actually a mildly narcotic tea, but I like to drink the tea because it's relaxing. It's only an annual in this zone, like originates in places like Africa and where it's a lot warmer. And so there are perennials in that part of the world, but here it's just an annual, and if you're lucky you'll get a flower by the end of the season. But these are doing great. I've originally planted them in peat pellets and just transplanted the peat pellets into a larger pot. So it can overtake this pot and be a nice plant I can just have on my patio or something like that. Down there I have some Swiss chard growing in a yogurt container of all things. And so that's looking pretty good in there. I'm snacking on some of these edible leafy greens today. Just a little bit of Swiss chard, a little bit of lettuce. Oh, what else was there? I guess a little bit of my celery and the chia. Over there I have some onions that I started from seed, just in a large flat, and hopefully they'll grow bigger and become bulbs to be planted out in the garden. They definitely should, but these were actually planted by pretty old seeds. Like they say, onions, the seeds from onions, like if they're over a year old, they said they have a very low germination rate, but these seeds were like 3 years old, and I still got a decent amount of them to germinate. Some of them have died, but still a decent amount in there, so happy about that. Over here I have some asparagus starts, so second attempt at asparagus. Like last year I planted some out in my hugelkultur and they're still there, so they should come back this year, but I had leftover seeds, so I thought, oh, why not plant them, and I'll have some more asparagus to plant somewhere else, or if the ones in, for some reason, in my hugelkultur bed fails, I can plant those maybe in its place or somewhere else where they'll do better. But I imagine both of them are going to do pretty good. This one's quite massive. It's a potato, and so these just came from a bag of store-bought potatoes that had grown eyes, so I just planted them in some compost and they're doing awesome. Might need to put them in a bigger pot soon, or I can just harvest small potatoes, but I just like having this big plant here, kind of this focal point of my indoor garden. Yeah. This is pretty cool. It's not really what you would expect, but these are medjool dates. And so these were just from the pits of dates I bought at the health food store, and they grew. When I did a germination test, they germinated, and then I planted them, and they're really growing. These are actually a type of palm. They're a type of palm tree. They just look like long blades of grass. And I imagine they'll kind of branch out, or however it works eventually. I might need to up-pot them pretty soon, but some are just starting to grow. That one. Some are a lot further along, which is nice. Here's a little milk jug experiment I'm doing. I'm growing some radishes just in the milk jug, so some of the benefits you can get with that are there's a bigger amount of soil that it holds, and you can carry it around pretty easy from place to place. It's got holes in the bottom, or kind of in the side, so allows for drainage. And maybe they'll get big enough that I can eat a few radishes in before the growing season actually starts. Not all these plants I'm actually planning to transplant out into the garden, just something I can kind of snack on in the meantime, in the hunger gap, so they say. Here I got some wild hemp plants. So these are the ruderalis species of cannabis, which is less known, but they grow wild in parts of Eurasia. They have a much shorter lifespan because they are adapted to grow in conditions when the growing season is relatively short. And so I got 4 of them here, and these grow good just under grow lights because they don't grow very tall, unlike the more common variety of hemp that grows very tall. So yeah, I'm excited about these. Here I got a few tomatoes. Well, there's kind of tomatoes here too. So they're getting to be a pretty good size. I'm not planning to go all out on tomatoes this year. I'm just, ideally, I'd like to let some of the volunteer tomatoes grow in the garden where there were tomatoes growing last year. And if I focus on volunteers, I can spend more of my energy growing other plants indoors without taking up so much space. This is a bean plant grown from a saved seed from last year's bean plant that I started really early indoors. So I started this one really early too, and it's a nice size. I don't think it's making beans, but still a nice plant to have. Same with these sunflowers. So these were originally planted them early last year from bird seed, and they germinated into sunflowers, and I grew those sunflowers, and then these are the saved seeds from those sunflowers. So these are a second generation. They're doing pretty great, and hopefully they can grow to make more sunflowers that I can save seeds from those as well. A couple peppers in there. Can't remember exactly what kind they were, but they're some sort of bell pepper. Might be from my saved seed collection. It's hard to say. Didn't label them as such, I just labeled them as peppers. I got some marshmallow plant, which is actually very similar to the hollyhock. They're all in the Malva family of plants, and which include Malva zebrina, Althea officinalis, which is the marshmallow, and also the hollyhocks. I can't remember the scientific name off the top of my head, but yeah, those are great plants to grow. Got a couple marigolds in there, and they're doing great. These are saved from some potted marigolds I had growing last year, so that's great. And a fennel, a single fennel plant, and they say fennel's a terrible companion, but it's growing with all these other plants just fine, not causing any problems, so that's good. And down there I have some avocado trees, juvenile avocado trees. And so they're looking nice and healthy. And so those were obviously from saved avocado seeds from avocados from the store. And same with these lemons. These were just saved from store-bought lemons. And they're still going, so that's great. I just recently up-potted these, so they look much happier now, I'd say. There you have it, folks, my little indoor garden. Well, I hope you enjoyed the little tour, a little update of my indoor garden. Hope this inspires you to just get growing something. Doesn't matter, you don't have to do a lot like this, or if you want to, or you can do more, obviously. But I just hope you enjoyed the tour, and spring is just around the corner, even though it doesn't seem like it. It's like we got like a foot of snow just this weekend, so that's pretty crazy. But spring will be here soon enough, and be time for planting our gardens and all that. So, well, thanks so much for watching. Hope you have a good one, and until next time, happy growing, everybody.